So I'm now going to bring a couple of artists to the stage to discuss how they use digital platforms to challenge social injustice and uplift the untold narratives of communities across Minnesota. So to facilitate the conversation, right now I want to bring up Nancy Musinguzi to the stage.
Good morning. Oh, that's too funny. Okay. Well, we have an incredible lineup of artists, incredible group of talented young people who have given their time to this morning to share their stories and their narratives and their perspectives on how those digital platforms have been driving their passions and driving change in their communities. So I'd like to introduce Alan De Leon Taverna, cinematographer, filmmaker, Tori Hong, illustrator and designer, and Zeam Porter, all-around incredible community organizer, mixed media artist, just badass, change maker, who all of them have inspired me and continue to inspire the work that I do. And I will be hosting this panel this morning. So let's bring them to the stage. Let's just get going. Go for it.
Alan De Leon Taverna, hello. I'm here today because I know the cinematographer who made this film. We met several years ago, and I just hope to give some insight into the behind the scenes or the stages of production that this film went through.
Hi, my name is Zeam Porter. I identify as a gender nihilist or gender fluid person. I'm black, queer, and trans, so that's cool. I'm also just a depressed teen who knows how to use my mouth and talk a lot. So that's kind of why I'm here. I also know Patience as well as Joby, who are two activists that you could see behind the scene, not behind, but in the background of the film. Yeah, and I guess I'm just a kind of artist here who likes to curate shows or just since I went to a private school, I know how to talk to white people, so sometimes it's really fun to be in my community and then scheme on white folks to get money. So that's why I'm here. That's an art form.
That's the social practice.
Hi everyone, my name's Tori Sung-Mee Hong. Hi everyone, my name's Tori Sung-Mee Hong. I am a visual artist, and I also am starting to learn how to make zines, so that's something that's been really exciting to me. I've only recently started using my art for activism and organizing. In high school, I suffered a lot from mental illness and stopped doing the things that I love doing, which was drawing. And recently have I started picking that back up, and so that's been really fun. I started out as an organizer and then started incorporating my art. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Dope. Should I introduce myself?
Yes.
Okay. So my name's Nancy Musinguzi. I'm originally from New Jersey. I'm a documentary photographer. How did I get to Minnesota, right? I'm from the East Coast. Why am I here? I was Youthprise's artist in residence 3 years ago. I had documented primarily just hip hop and underground art culture communities in the East Coast, and that intersected with social justice movements emerging around that time. And I covered a Million Hoodie March in Harlem in Union Square, uploaded those photos to Facebook, and I found myself doing a gallery show on race and equity in the arts in Minneapolis a few months after that. And I started to see the power of storytelling and why does it matter who's behind the lens and who's driving that narrative. And I've stuck around and made some friends, some really awesome people who are passionate about the same exact things, also engaging young people in those conversations and those building those skills as well. I've worked with SPNN, recently just did a project with their youth and did a gallery show, and their photos are hung up in the lobby. So you exit for lunch after this talk. You can check that out. And now I'm moderating this panel on a really awesome and incredible relevant topic that is Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. That's why I hate talking about myself, and that's why I'm moderating in this talk. But anyway, so with that said, maybe my first question to everyone is, describe your practice. Like, how do you do these things in the world? How have you created these possibilities for, not just for yourself, but the people you want to reach or expand those imaginations around? What change can look like, and how are you using digital media to do that?
So we decided to go this way this time. So I will try to give you my best answer. So like I said, I'm an artist, an illustrator. I created 2 pieces that I think are relevant to this topic today. And both of them came from just like, well, one of them I was an organizer with the work and did interviews with, it's a group called MPD 150. It's a police abolition group trying to abolish the Minneapolis Police Department on its 150th anniversary, which is 2017 this year. And so what I did is I did interviews with people within the collective and drew portraits of them. And my question was, what does a police-free world look like? And everyone had different responses, and you know, some of them shared similar themes and some of them didn't, which was really, really rad. And I drew their portraits with like their quotes in kind of like a comic book style format. And that has gotten shared, you know, within the collective. It's been used for a lot of different things. And it even got shared on, well, like another thing, like when you're doing this work is like it can be like scary in a way, because it got shared on Reddit, and like a bunch of like white supremacists were like, you know, talking crap about the project and talking crap about me. And like, it's just like that kind of stuff has happened to me before. So it's like, what is dangerous, you know, when that stuff happens, and then what isn't, or what's just, you know, people talking. And so, yeah, I guess how I do this work is just like really being like either following what the work is, like following the work that's being done, and like being in community with them and in relationship with like the people doing the work, and or doing the work yourself and like uplifting that narrative.
I realized I didn't even talk about my art, which was interesting, but like I'm a poet as well as a filmmaker, as well as I don't know. I just really like words. I really like collages. I like making zines, and I love like bringing people together. So like this summer, I like, again, when talking about money, because I think money and wealth is important. Okay, can I pause? Okay, this film, I love this film, but it made me really sad because like, as Black people, under capitalism, we're seen as property, right? So like, part of this tension is because like whenever we try to get our rights, we're funny with people's money, and they don't like that. White supremacists don't like that. So like as much as we can, or as much as I can, I like to think about my art has value, I have value, and like even though I want to be anti-capitalistic, money's important. So like this summer, I like go to McAllister College, and they were like giving out money for folks who have entrepreneurship ideas, right? And I was like, okay, business is really cool, but like art is a business. Like creating and constructing is a business. So my friend and I wrote this proposal to make it look like we would start a business, and instead started a nonprofit, and like started this summer hosting like just different events so we could be like part of the public, part of parks, and like bring art to the community as well as food, and like under the gauze of entrepreneurship, under the gauze of we're trying to make money, we just blew a whole bunch of money on other artists and made people uncomfortable. So yeah, I guess that's what, and then with my zines, I kind of just like them to be rough drafts of my thoughts and feelings, because being Black and mentally ill, the state doesn't like that either. They're like, if you can't produce profit for me, why are you here? So like oftentimes I'm like, why am I here? I'm not making money, I'm not making art, I'm not, but then I'm like, my Blackness is enough. So a lot of my zines are just about that.
Zeam, if you don't mind, I'm going to use your subject matter to transition into talking about the film. Please do. Because this film happens because someone starts rolling. That is how it begins. The director and the assistant director and the producers don't just call the cinematographer and say, hey, we have this budget, and come down here, and we've got a place for you to live and everything. No, all of these people who end up being the primary filmmakers on this project show up on their own accord, on their own dime. Some of them, you're just shooting photos at first. Some of them are there to organize and don't necessarily plan on being involved in a film. And some of them know that they're gonna go do the work necessary to bring together different media voices and outlets and try to form a narrative. So all those elements come together, but there's value that needs to be created for the project to be able to sustain itself. You know, people are traveling in and out of the movement at the time because they got to go back home and work to make some money to pay the bills, so then come back and do another couple weeks of shooting. And so I get a call from Lucas, and he's like, I'm down here. I guess we're staying right now in a university. There's some housing options available. We're looking for assistant editors, and they just did it guerrilla style, run and gun. Once they have that footage, they're able to kind of shop it around, and they get some budgets, and they get some better sound equipment, and they get some better cameras. But at the end of the day, at that stage, they're still just there because they started, because they knew that there was a story to tell. But the money really comes into play in how this film is presented to you. Like, they don't know that on day one, Magnolia Pictures is gonna pick this up and distribute it, and that it's gonna be accessible to be able to screen at SPNN. And that's what interests me about what you were saying. I don't know if you're gonna weigh in on that. As far as like where this film meets the marketplace and how that affects the way we view this film. Like, are we watching a protest film? I think we are,
Yeah.
but I think it's important to think about how this film arrives to us, both the passion of the filmmakers involved and then where they necessarily meet the industry.
Yeah, I guess that's the question for y'all, because when I watch this film, I think about, like, dang, like, when someone says, like, when Brittany was like, or I have a felony charge, and they're like, oh, that means I can't have a job, right? And, like, so that stops me from doing things. I just wonder, like, it's less about the distribution for me when it comes about money side, and more about, like, the folks in the film. And, like, to know that, like, oh my, or, like, the folks creating this film. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, seeing this film helped me realize that, like, me not having the money to start something right now doesn't mean, doesn't stop my spark, right? Like, this, like, I don't have to go to the store to go buy gasoline in order for my spark to, like, ensure something. Like, okay, we can do this together, and like that, and it can come along, right? But what makes this so powerful in terms of money is that, like, without the distribution, we wouldn't be able to see this. But as artists, we're on the same flow. And I don't have the answer of how to make those two things exist in the same space or in the same world right now, but I think that's why we're here right on this stage.
So I'm going to follow up with that real quick, and I also omitted something super major too. So I did go down to Ferguson in 2014, but the portion of the time that I was there, the film did not document or like include, and I documented the economic boycotts happening. A lot of local grassroots organizations and folks like Brittany and Alexis and other young people that were rooted in Ferguson before all these things were happening, shutting down the universities and other institutions that have benefited from white supremacy and systems that support those policies that are now causing all of this tension. So I went down to Ferguson with 4 other activists, and one of them being Patience Zalanga, who's not here with us today right now. But how I documented my trip was uploading my stuff to Instagram every day. And people going, wait, that wasn't on the news? Wait, is that really happening? Like, there's like peaceful times, there's like a lot of tension, people are going here, people are doing this. This is what crowds look like. There are children at protests, there's old people there, there's people who are disabled. Like, all of these narratives have kind of went under the radar or kind of just omitted, which is like really major. But Instagram was my channel. I didn't have a film crew to come and produce a film, or I didn't have a lot of money to produce a bunch of photo books and distribute it to classrooms or whatever, but I used what I had. So maybe my follow-up question, and kind of just tying it into kind of like equity access in how you share your work and how you do your work and how you connect with people in the work that you do. How is digital media leveling the playing field for organizers passionate about issues to have issues to have a voice and make change. Did everyone get that? Okay.
I feel like, I don't know, it's kind of amazing how digital media allows like our stories to be told. I mean, like you were just talking about your personal experience, Nancy, with Instagram. And for me, it's more so been Facebook. I've been able to share like my art and my stories and amplify other people's art and stories. And one thing that I really do love about creating art with movement is that I think that art has this way of creating vision and hope for, I mean, it tells a lot of stories, right? It can tell like stories of heartbreak, stories of pain, stories of injustice, and I also think it can be used to like think about possibilities. And I think what I've seen, like, not so much now, but like maybe a year or two ago, it was like really like, you know, a lot of stories that like really like hurt, you know, like it's like a lot of like injustice, a lot of police brutality, and these are really important stories to be shared and uplifted. And I was like, okay, what are ways that we can like also bring in like, how do we bring in like air to this movement? How do we deepen our breath and like hold each other, you know? And so like the art that I try to create is one of like finding hope and resilience in the face of all this injustice, like not ignoring the fact that this stuff is happening because it's very real. But like, you know, how do we also share those messages too? And so I think social media has been like a great way of being able to do that. So it's just like kind of studying that. I don't know, it's like weird. Like you all are like experts in social media, right? Like you all know the trends, you know what's being posted, and it's like, what are the stories that aren't being told that like you can share? You know, what are your visions? And like, that's all it is like tapping into your heart and like your intuition and sharing that. And then, I don't know, that changes, even if it's like your friends or your community or, you know, your school or whatever. Yeah.
And I don't want to date myself, but when I was in high school, to get a picture onto Twitter, you had to upload it to Lockers. It was like a third-party photo hosting app. All right, that was only like 5 years ago. I swear, there's been so much that has changed on that end of it. Like the cameras, those tools have been in our hands as filmmakers, but I mean, when I was in high school, I couldn't imagine just sharing a video and posting it and have it be passed around. To me, that's the number one thing, is that when it's out there, it's out there.
I don't know if y'all know about Vimeo or like y'all know about YouTube or like short films, like connecting this back to distribution too. Social media and the internet is making it so that we can control the means. I know that's really Marxist, but it means like like your phone is your phone. That's powerful. Like you could take, like any one of y'all right now could take a photo here that's better than an editorial magazine just because you have better insight than the folks who do. You have insight, grounding, and creativity, and all they have is privilege. All they have is a tool and a camera. And like now that it's becoming more accessible to us, like they have nothing on us. I don't know if you see the trends now on Instagram magazine covers or whatever, but they're constantly taking our words and our language. And we know that like American culture runs on Black youth culture, and that's like we know that for a fact. Like y'all come up with the words, like y'all come up with it. We come up with the dances. We come up with the clothes. We comes up with the film ideas and everything. And I think that personally knowing that okay, my friend has a phone, so I can record another friend of mine dancing who's amazing dancer or choreographer, put that up online, and other folks can see that, and like it can be bigger than just a dance movement in that moment. Or like going back to the film too, I saw Pops there, or a person who I call Pops there was like an older guy. I don't have contact with intergenerational love, intergenerational hope. Like Black folks all across the like trans folk, Black and trans folks who are alive past the age of 18 is pretty incredible. The 23rd Black trans woman died this year, right? I wouldn't know that without social media. I wouldn't know how to get, like, I wouldn't know how to tell my friends about hormones without social media, all these things. Or like zines, like going back to that, like you can cut something out of a paper now, create a portrait, upload it online, and have someone realize, oh my gosh, my blackness is beautiful. Oh my gosh, my transness is important. Like, that's pretty dope shit.
Yes.
I don't know. Sorry, I ran for a while. Y'all gonna have to take this mic from me sometime.
Well, you're like segueing perfectly into my next question, which is, what are the pros and cons of digital media and its role in amplifying voices that would typically go unheard in everyday dialogue on social change? So like,
You
Reddit,
have to
like-
have a filter. You have to have your own filter and think for yourself and question the things that you see, now so more than ever. There's like a lot of misinformation out there, but I don't think that's a bad idea. It's just a product of a conversation being had. But you gotta, at the end of the day, you gotta trust yourself because there's so much information.
Okay, so I don't play basketball anymore, but there's some people who, because of media and because of digital, like news outlets and Facebook and YouTube, if they looked up my name, all they would know me by is, oh, that trans kid who cried at a discussion and made our governor care about trans athletes for a minute. I'm not even an athlete anymore. You know what I mean? So like media can be very two-dimensional in the sense that like if you just see someone's activism or you see someone's art in a stamp of time and you don't look at that time stamp, you think that's who they are when you meet them in real life. So I think in that way, because of the disconnect between reality and virtual reality can be beneficial because then it creates the spaces for folks to be out in one area but not the other. It creates like closed Facebook groups of just like support, or of stuff like really radical or going against folks. Like activists use things all the time, but that disconnect can be amazing because then we can create a world that does not currently exist online, which is dope because then we can create a world like without police officers. Like a world without police officers already exists because you drew it. So that means it can exist in reality, right? So
And be represented.
And be represented, right? Like because we have black trans representation a little bit on media, maybe we can live longer in real life because we are permanently in that sphere. That's dope. But what's as hard is like if we forget that disconnect is that like we can go home and watch Netflix and think that the world's gonna be okay without us.
Well, then someone else is there
Right.
maybe misrepresenting something. Mm-hmm. It's like if you don't represent what you know to be true, someone else is going to
Tell your story.
Yeah. So hijack your narrative. Reclaim that.
I think for me, something I've been thinking about is both surveillance through like email, through Facebook, through Twitter and Instagram, all that stuff. I also worry about net neutrality. That's something that's coming up again because they want to, I don't know much about the details, but like I know that folks, like really big companies want to make you pay to like make companies pay to have their content be seen or whatever. And so like stuff like what we're doing actually wouldn't be as accessible, which is in a direct response to like stuff like what we're creating now and what has been created. So in that way, that scares me. It scares me that Facebook owns Instagram now, and like they control what we see. Like Instagram isn't anymore like, oh, what's the newest thing on our feed, right? It's like, what's the most popular thing? And it shows something that happened 6 days ago, and it's like, oh, well, I didn't know that happened, like 6 days ago until like today. And so personally, what I would love to see is like people like us, people like y'all creating like something like Facebook, but like intentionally for like, radical politics and for people of color, queer people, trans folks, people with disabilities, people like stuff for us, so that we don't have to rely on like billion-dollar corporations to like tell our stories. Like that's really, really scary to me that they own that, and they get to control what we see.
technically all of the content that
Yeah.
you've put there.
Yeah. But like I also know and like trust that like having conversations like this, like we can build those platforms for us. So
And my last question is, how could we, and you can define what we is, like, how can we use digital media to make us more better connected?
I was thinking about that. Like, you know how Facebook has algorithms and so does Google? So like when you search into your Google bar, there's like little, I like to think of them as spiders, but they're not. But they're like just, but there's like these little nanobots that like to connect the webs and show up your search, right? To me, part of like just being a dope, like for survival, there's sometimes like I've had to like bend the truth or bend things in the reality so that I stay alive, right? So that means like as a Black, queer, trans youth, I already am an innovator. Like we are innovators because we are alive right now. So we can use digital media and to be persuasive and subversive. Like some activists online now, they're like, okay, I know that Google has an algorithm. I know that Facebook has an algorithm. I'm gonna use that to my benefit. So some activists started putting congratulations as the first part of their Facebook post, and then talked about how much college debt is, right? So then that means because of the Facebook algorithms and those spiders going wild, every time someone's like wants to see something popular, they see congratulations, I have a lot of debt. And you know what I mean? And like that's genius, right? So like even when like things like net neutrality or like big companies are trying to play us or like exploit us, we come back at them again time and time again because we, I don't know. Right now I'm because we're the best. Thank you. Yeah, we're the best to the point of that. So I think that like seeing the problems, having a critical eye, and constantly having that spark and like being conscious to know that like, oh, my art is important because without it, they would have nothing. They would literally have nothing if it wasn't for my existence. So like, and translate that to digital media, my movie is important, or that idea to have that interview as a little YouTube skit is important. And I'm gonna put that tag on it that shows that. So I'm gonna say congratulations to myself, or you know what I mean? Cause I did it. So I think that's what it, like, yeah. Yeah. We want that.
Yeah, sure. In the meantime, I'm gonna pull up some of Alan's work.
I brought one thing, and I think that wanted to bring this back. Maybe I should have introed myself like this, but I have been lately thinking about how important it is to, like you said, tell your story, speak your truth, and represent something so that you know it's not misrepresented. And I think the most important thing that I can do with my art right now is document my mother's Aztec dance group that was founded 18 years ago, Calpuliquetzalcoatlicue. I mean, even 20 years ago, the means to document these indigenous ceremonies and this culture that has been hidden within Catholicism and mystified by Mexican nationalism. Now I can see ceremonies on Facebook Live that are happening in remote areas of Mexico. Like that was never possible before, but I think it's important to document the group because that's where my skill set lies, and that's, I think, what can be most represented in our community is these images that are otherwise used by other people for their own advances. I think we, especially Latino people and most people of color, are underrepresented in the media, so when we see ourselves represented, we're quick to grab onto something because it feels good to see yourself on screen, but it might not necessarily be an honest representation. So I think that's what keeps me making films and hitting that record button on the camera.
I really liked what Zeam was talking about earlier about like, doing like interviews for yourself or like creating zines and like creating like portraits or like collages of like what it looks like to be like a Black, queer, and trans like youth, that's one thing that I think is really important in keeping us connected to each other is like complicating our narratives and our stories and also how we relate to each other, because I feel like white supremacy tries to like keep us from each other, right? Like it's like, oh, I can't connect with you because like and it's like it's really complicated, like all of these like interracial like tensions are really real and they're complicated, but also there's a lot of narratives of like resistance with each other, you know, like there's the Brown Berets, like Latino folks that worked with the Black Panthers, that worked with Yellow Peril, like Asian Americans back in the 60s, you know? And like these kind of stories, and like even us being friends and up here right now and like knowing each other, like this isn't something that's readily like shared and available. So I think just like complicating our narratives and like sharing that, and also connecting to each other like in between those narratives, like Zeam said, like it's easy to be like, oh, I'm this two-dimensional character online, you know? Like I kind of joke about that sometimes. Like I have my like government name that like no one knows, you know? And that's the person that holds my money, because that's not me. And it's just like what like, and I feel like it's so easy to think of ourselves as a character, but it's important also to do like, you know, your own character building, your own storytelling, and listening to other people's stories too, and connecting across those lines. And I think something that Alan was saying earlier too about like being able to like see like these like spiritual performances in like rural Mexico, like that stuff doesn't, I think just this idea that we can connect like across borders, which is, you know, imposed by imperialism and white supremacy.
WhatsApp.
Yeah. I mean, like that's freaking amazing. And like, you know, I just think like seeing like what other people are doing and like intentionally connecting with that too, and like being able to like travel, or if you know a friend who's going, you know, to that place, like connect with them in that way. I don't know. It's really amazing, and I really appreciate that. Yeah.
I recently like met this artist who's a director, and he's making how do I describe this nicely? I'm gonna just do it. He makes documentaries that if you watch them, you feel like you were watching them on drugs because of the editing style. You're like, oh my gosh, like this is like trippy, like this is like an LSD like montage, but it's also about like native roots and like all these things. And he said something once, he was like, there's a difference between information and knowledge. I make artwork so that white folks understand this information, but my people get the knowledge. So like making things, you know, that are for your culture, I think is another thing for digital media too, is like information should be widespread, and knowledge is something that we hold in us that like folks get, right? So creating films that are like, you know, like She's Gotta Have It, like on Netflix now. Like, okay, like all, right? Like that's amazing, right? But if you look at it, like that was made for a Black audience, but like all people enjoy it, right? So long we've been given media just made for white folks and told that we're supposed to get knowledge from this and not just information. And like some deep, like this, like, oh, like I can see a white woman on TV and then know how to be happy in my own life. Like that's just not gonna be reality, right? So like digital media is giving us this ability to just showcase things for our folks and like for each other in ways that spread information, so folks are like, oh, not all Black folks do this, or not all like even there can be intergenerational folks, like, oh wait, there can be like Latinx Black folks and Asian folks on the same stage. Wow, impressive. But like, I don't know, I think that getting to the idea of the difference between information and knowledge, and knowing that digital media is finally letting all of us hold that and manipulate it and create something new.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for attending this talk and this panel. Thank you so much for giving your time and providing amazing insight and perspective on these very incredible, critical issues.
Thanks to Youthprise and SPNN for having us.
Shout out to Youthprise.